Welcome, everyone. My name is Melanie McGackin, and I am excited to host today's Sharing Possibilities in Community Living Learning event on behalf of the Rutgers Community Living Education Project. The Rutgers Community Living Education Project, also known as CLEP, is a program through the Rutgers School of Public Health with funding through the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities. The CLEP team can serve as a bridge for self-advocates and families whose loved ones are ready to explore community living options. CLEP is committed to providing individual guidance, mentoring, and information surrounding community living resources for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Today's presentation, Community Housing with Supports for People with Intellectual and/or Developmental Disabilities, is being presented by Diane Riley, the Executive Director of the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey. Before we get started, I want to share how you can best participate in today's learning event. To ensure the highest sound quality possible, all attendees will be muted during today's webinar. We do, however, like to keep these sessions interactive. So to ask a question to today's presenter or host, please use the Q&A option on your screen. If you would like to be unmuted to ask your question live, please just send us a quick message in the chat feature, and we will make sure to unmute your microphone during your turn. Topic-specific questions will be addressed as long as time allows. And for consideration to all of our attendees, we encourage you to keep your questions as general as possible. Diane, if you can forward the slide, please. If you have specific questions, please reach out to the CLEP team or the Supportive Housing Association following today's conversation. At this time, I would like to welcome today's presenter, Ms. Diane Riley. Diane, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate you inviting me to speak today, and I hope this finds the audience learning something new. I've done this presentation a number of times, but there's always a number of people who haven't heard it. So if you have more specific questions, I hope there'll be time at the end for those questions and answers. I hope to do that. So thank you very much. As Melanie suggested, I am the Executive Director of the Supportive Housing Association, and I've been with SHA 7 years. It's hard to believe, but it is 7 years. I'm very proud of our organization. Our organization is a nonprofit statewide trade association that's been in existence. This is our 25th year in existence, and we hold a unique spot in the state. We are the only organization that focuses on supportive housing in the state, and that is a trade association of members who support the industry of supportive housing, and that could be people who are developers, people who develop affordable housing. We have a number of a large number of service providers that provide services for people with a variety of barriers and special needs. So from the ARCs to mental health associations and various other groups. And we also then have corporate vendors who support the industry in a number of ways. For example, architectural design specific to people with special needs, or furniture providers who provide furniture for nonprofits and whose work that and support we also need. And we have a lot of financial organizations, banks that support financing the supportive housing and provide a number of grants to us. So we are very excited that we have such a robust membership. We don't have individual memberships per se. We structured around organizations, and we feel that that policy is the best way to advance the industry. But we do have a number of individual consultants who can be members. And we, of course, look to the people with lived experience and families to guide the work that we do. We do a number of focus groups a year to try to get that. We've had a number of grants where we had quite a lot of focus groups, and we really want to hear from people what their needs are, so obviously. So that's kind of a snapshot of our organization. So what is supportive housing? Supportive housing is sort of a philosophy of the idea that people can live independent lives in communities of their choice throughout New Jersey, really, in every community. And they need certain things to do that. One, they need affordability, but they also need services to be able to be independent. But we do believe that this is a model that works. We have seen it work, and it came out of a couple of acknowledgments that were, kind of now almost 2 decades old, but the thinking that people have a right to live in the least restrictive setting. So the Olmsted decision had a lot to do with that. We also understand that people who are homeless and who are in need of housing, there are a number of things that that would provide success to them receiving housing, and it's not just the housing. So there's also services that need to be had to even end homelessness and for people to be able to be successful in maintaining their tenancy. So supportive housing is a model, and it is used by people of a variety of barriers. People who are homeless, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people with mental health or behavioral health challenges, those with addiction, people who are aging. You see the list here. And I just want to say that we are in full acknowledgement that people aren't one thing, right? So I am a leader of a nonprofit organization that does supportive housing, but I'm also a mother and a grandmother, and I am an ordained minister, and there are many facets to me, and that people aren't just one thing. So someone who's aging might have physical disabilities. Someone who's a veteran may have behavioral health challenges. So we aren't just one thing. So supportive housing is a model that provides services, and services really dependent on what that person needs. That's the successful model, and we know it works. So what do they all need? What do you all need, and what do you all have in common? Well, certainly the people that we serve need affordability. Most people, not all, but most people are even in the low income arena. So they may work or may not be able to work with paid employment, but they may get some SSI or some other income, but they will put that towards their housing. So they definitely need affordability as a piece to their housing, right? They all need the housing to be available. We need to have that housing available in communities of their choice, especially people with challenges need that housing to be available near their loved ones, oftentimes near their circle of support. They need it to be available where they work, perhaps. So they need availability of that housing, not in just certain towns, but all over. That's what would work best, right? They need to have it be accessible in terms of finding it. And this is a challenge. I know you're going to say that. It's like, but how do I find supportive housing? Where is supportive housing? Well, that's a challenge we're working on in this state. It's not really coordinated in terms of where all the housing availability is. So we need to be working on how to make it accessible, how to make it easy to apply for housing. I always was a great proponent is let's have, we have college applications that have a college app and then a supplemental application. Why can't we have a housing, just a general application for housing and supplemental for any specific needs, or rather than a number of different forms and hoops that people have to jump to apply. It is definitely probably one of the biggest challenges we find in the state. So we need to know where it is, and we need to make it easy to apply, right? So, and we need accommodations. We need that housing to be accessible in that way. So we need certain accommodations. We need a certain kind of design. We need elevators. We can't have a lot of steps. We need the bathrooms to be accommodating. So there needs to be a certain amount of accommodation for the housing and sort of a universal design to that. So I would think these are the components that everybody needs, really, everybody needs. And this is where we should be moving towards that. So when I talk about supportive housing, it's not the easiest housing to develop or to make work, because there are a number of components. So I'm just going to say there are a number of components to supportive housing. You need three basic things. You need capital finance to build affordable housing, right? You need to be able to have that financing. You see housing going on across New Jersey now in every town. You definitely need the funding to build that housing. We had a sort of a stall in building affordable housing for many, many years. Every town is responsible to build a certain amount of affordable housing, but towns often fight that condition. And so after a number of years of lawsuits, those towns have settled with the agreement of the number of units they need to build. And that's why you're seeing so much building going on. Finally, after about a decade, we're behind the 8 ball because there's so much need and we haven't been building it. The financing you need to build that comes from the feds, federal government. It comes from the state government, and it comes from banks and private foundations. We also need subsidies. We need subsidies for many different reasons. We need subsidies not only so someone can afford to rent housing. We need a subsidy. Oftentimes that subsidy supports the builder and the people who maintain that housing to have a guaranteed income to maintain that property. So it has a dual purpose, but we definitely need the vouchers and subsidies for people to be able to use that to pay the rent. And of course, for supportive housing uniquely, you need services, right? You need the services to be able to be independent. So you need those three components, and that's why it's a challenge to make work, but it does work, and it does save money and give a better quality of life to people, more importantly. I just want to point out our website. You can see at www.shawnj.org. We have a lot of materials on our website that we have been able to develop with grants, a lot of grants through the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. So I want to give them a shout out. They've been supporters for years, but we have a number of other grants, and we have them all on our website, and we created a special place for them called the Housing Hub, and it's chock full of information, and this is where you should go. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is in here, and so a lot of information going to be presented today. I would say you're going to have to go back to this to read some of it, but it's there for you. It's open to everybody, not just our members. This is open to the public. So just to review a few of the things on our Navigator website before we get into other things. So the first thing we were able to do, and this came about in about 2015, is the Journey to Community Supports with Housing. And that guide, which is up here, you see it on the left, I do have some print copies. It's a little dated now, but it's also available in English and Spanish on our websites with hot links. It is about 70 pages, so it's a bit thick, but it does go through a little bit of the kinds of housing that's available in the United States and in New Jersey, the kinds of things, some of which we'll go over today, goes through the funding we're going to be talking about. It does go, probably the best thing is, and I'll tell you, the page number is 32 on that, is the flow chart, right? So most people come and they start with, I don't even know what to do when my loved one turns 18 or 21. What do I do first? And it really is a beautiful flow chart on what you do first, how do you apply, a little bit of what the NJCAT does, talks about, and a little bit of antiquated language, the support programs, and then what happens if you get denied and what you do. And I think that flow chart is the flow chart that most people use repeatedly, and so much so that we developed, because of the council, and the council gave us money to do all of these things. Because of that, we developed this accessing developmental disability services in New Jersey, much smaller guide on the right, and that still has the flow chart, because people thought that that flow chart was the best thing that they were able to get out of it. But this includes a little bit of child services. And then, because things are moving so fast in the state, and we did not have time, even in the 70 pages of that initial guide, we did not have time to go over things that we wanted to go over in depth. We created resource bulletins, 4 resource bulletins, one specifically, what happened there? One specifically on rental assistance, just on rental assistance. And we did one on what affordable housing means. And we did one on workability and one on technology. So there's 4 resource bulletins that are a little bit more up to date, and they go through things. For example, when we did the journey, the Supportive Housing Connection, which is one of the the organizations that maintain the vouchers that are from DDD, that didn't even really exist when we did the guide. So the rental assistance bulletin goes into things like that. So we have 4 of those. And then we have 4 videos that are really terrific videos. And I'm going to play a little bit of those videos today. They're really great. I think they present some unusual mix and match situations, and I'm really proud of those videos. And then we also have something called Navigators, and I was talking to Melanie a little bit about that when we started. We did do one navigator class. I don't want to use the word navigators anymore because there's so much going on with housing navigation, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we go towards the end. But we were able to train people with a little bit more in-depth understanding of supportive housing, and those people are on our website. There you go. Those people are on our website, and their contacts are on our website. So they're a good place to start when you need help. And a lot of them are support brokers and support coordinators. So all of this exists on our website. Okay, so when we start to talk about kinds of housing that exist, kinds of housing that you might want to think about, I would say that the first place you want to start would be individual apartments, right? People can live independently in individual apartments with the right kinds of services. We see that a lot. And that is supportive housing sort of at its best, but that's not the only housing that exists. This is Ken Regan, showing you how wonderful he's designed his apartment here in a building that is supportive housing individual apartments. We have a lot of developers who have a really special affinity for supportive housing. Some people have gotten into supportive housing because they have a family member who needs it. So that's not surprising, or have a disability themselves. We have shared housing that can be built also. Shared housing can be, and that's not a shared housing, she's actually living independently, but I'll talk about her in a minute. But shared housing can be sharing an apartment with someone, and I'll show you a little video of 2 people doing that. You can have people sharing an apartment, that we have 2 people who are disabled sharing an apartment, but you can have a shared living arrangement where you are living with someone who is not disabled, and you might develop that because the person might have rent that they're paying reduced, and and also be providing you with some services. So you might work out sort of a shared living arrangement, or not, or you'll just share the apartment like any roommates, right? And then you have support families, which are almost like foster families, which people who can support you, and you can have your loved one live with a support family, and they have a special affinity for whatever reason to be able to want to have someone who lives with them with a disability, and they get a certain amount of compensation for that. Of course, we have the traditional group homes, and that's usually 4 people, and that's still probably the most common model. And then we have intensified group homes for people who need some extra medical care, intentionalized specific group homes. And we do have those. Obviously, those services are different. I want to talk a little bit about Fran. Fran lives in she's a typical story, and so I want to talk a little bit about her. She's someone who was living with a relative for many, many years, and obviously most people are living with their relative until the relative gets older, or that becomes unsustainable for whatever reason. And that's kind of what happened to Fran. She wound up living with her aunt. Her aunt passed away. She was devastated, obviously, in so many ways, and she began to struggle. She began to look for places to live. She began to struggle with some medical issues because she decompensated. She began struggling with some behavioral health, mental health challenges. And, her circle of support was trying really desperately to find a situation, but she wound up going into a nursing home. Fran did not need to be in a nursing home. She had a lot of independence before her aunt passed away. So while she was in the nursing home, her circle of support began to advocate for a different living arrangement, and she was able to get some funding through a program called I Choose Home in New Jersey. And that is a program that specifically tries to move people out of nursing home situations that don't need to be there. And there's some funding for housing, and there's some funding for supports in that. And she was able to receive that. And she wound up moving into an apartment. She wound up developing some services that were specific to her through that funding. And she wound up living near a place near her family and friends, and began to become healthier and stronger. And she is enjoying her life now with a certain amount of independence as she had before. And that is the kind of thing that can happen. And so many people don't really get that opportunity, but in a way, because and the state tries to avoid that happening, right? Because they try to avoid that getting to the point where someone goes into a nursing home, and they try to really head that off at the pass. But really what you want is people to be able to find their independence before, they come into a situation where someone is in emergency and someone passes away. So that is what the CCP program tries to do, and they try to identify people with aging parents or loved ones so that they can avoid that. But that is Fran's story, and Fran became much more ambulatory once she was in a situation that both was physically and mentally conducive to the best life she could live. So those are some ideas. I just want to point out a couple of really great projects, one in the north and one in the south, just to give you an idea. Supportive housing doesn't always have to be for one population. It can be mixed. So I want to point out this Cherry Hill complex. It's one of the housing awards we gave out. Shaw gives out awards every year in projects, and this was one of our project awards. This was 160 units, and 32 of them were supportive housing units. There were independent apartments, and then there were 4-unit cottages on the ground floor, sort of group home like cottages. And these were both for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also seniors. So there's a lot of amenity in this project, and it's a low-income housing tax credit project, which was a project that the federal government supports. And so it's a great example of what kind of living you can have and what kind of projects that are out there. I want to also point out another project that we gave an award to, and this is in Fort Lee, very densely populated, opposite ends of the state. Bergen County. This is a project with 143 units, half of which basically are market rate, which means that you're living next to people who are paying top dollar for their unit. So it's a beautiful complex. And then there's 44 units that are affordable and 16 units that are individual apartments and 16 group home residents. So there are four-bedroom group homes embedded in this complex, and you would not know it because on top of those group homes on the floor above them, there are separate apartments, market rate apartments. So they're embedded in different floors. So they're really seamlessly integrated into this apartment complex. And that is really a great example, I think, of a project where you're living alongside people that do not have disabilities. And I think it's a really good example. So I'll just give you that. I'm going to play a little video. I'm going to stop there before we get into very specifics. I'm going to play a little video, a little portion of a video. This is an unusual situation of shared living, but it was basically developed through the people that were making it work, the families. So let me.
Matthew has autism. Took a while to find that out. Well, there are 136 categories of developmental disabilities, and he's got a few of them. Matthew's mom, Linda, was sick and dying, and suddenly I had to care for everything. She had taken care of all of our matters, all the house matters, and managed Matthew's life to a fairly well. She was really on the case. But then suddenly I had this responsibility on my hands. I called a support broker. I said, hey, we need more help. And she said, oh, I've got somebody, I think. Just placed her daughter in her own home, and Carmen now needs a job and a place to live. I just decided that was the time to make the move and to find a place for Matthew and maybe me and sell that house. And they found this place. We made a deal, moved in, and it's worked out very, very well. They all slipped in here like into a nice glove. Everything was so smooth right from the first day. The place was operating at a deficit. I was using Matthew's, what little was in his trust to pay the balance. And I tried to economize and all, but we were just eating it up. It's too expensive. It's a nice place, but for one guy, it's too much. And we're very lucky to have friends who have a young man in a similar situation. You have two young men and two sets of parents, and both have had been this experience and in various degrees of letting go. And if we weren't really compatible, it'd be hard. It was like music. It all worked so well.
Oh, Dan is a wonderful guy. He's full of energy, and he makes people smile when he's in a good mood, and that's a lot of the time. He's also obsessive. He gets really stuck about everything happening in its place. At age 21, they were eligible to be moved into group homes, the most affected ones, the lowest functioning people. They gave him a chance to move into a group home, and we looked at a couple, and they were okay, but I just wanted something that was more family-like if possible. Not too long after his name reached the top of the list, we heard that Tom's wife, who we knew was very ill, had passed away, and we met with Tom, and we found out that, in fact, he had sold his house, and he and Carmen and Matt had all moved to this condo. And he at the same time said, I'm running a deficit every month paying for this empty room, and which I no longer live in. In a way, it's a lot simpler because, one family owns the place and the other one is a renter. We've gotten a supported housing connection voucher through SHC and DDD together. So that's based on 1/3 of the agreed on maximum rent, market value rent for a place like this. This isn't a licensed group home, but it still had to meet, because of the subsidy voucher, it had to meet minimum living standards. Dan's now able to transit back and forth. He's gotten used to that routine too. And there are workers that come in for Matt and workers that come in for him. And, they are become buddies to a certain extent. But Matt and Dan are really somewhat on a par, even though Matt has much more language. And so Matt asks the questions and Dan supplies the answers over and over and over again until finally Dan says, "No more questions."
I love that. So no more questions. But anyway, that's an example of two families making their situation work. One owns the home, the other one rents and provides the rent through a voucher. So I'm going to just mention that the funding sources that you, as a person who is living in supportive housing, would use would be home and community-based services, and you'll get your services through DDD. You'll get SSI, which is your monthly income, really, and Medicaid. You'll get your services through Medicaid. So the departments that you will be dealing with. I'm going to mention the 3 Medicaid programs. The community care program, in the book it'll be CCW, but now it's community care, the sports program, and the MLTSS program, and that's for medically people who really need more medical services. These are Medicaid program funded programs. You might have heard about a waiver. Medicaid has an 1115 waiver. Everything is under that waiver. And really what a waiver is just provides the guardrails and the programming parameters that Medicaid will pay for. And they have grouped that into these 3 kinds of programs. Typically, Medicaid only pays for services. We always say that Medicaid does not pay for room and board. However, there's a little caveat to that. Right now, we have a very, very proactive Medicaid department in New Jersey, and they are always pushing the envelope to get Medicaid to pay for more things. So I will say something if we have time at the end about where we stand with the waiver, but these are programs within the waiver. You will be on one of these programs, one only. So if you are on the supports program, which is probably the most common program, you will get a supports program, be eligible for certain services under the supports program. When you become eligible for the CCP program and get to more of the top of that list, whether you have aging parents or whatever, you will have your services transferred to that program. A lot of the services are the same, but the money is different. So the CCP program provides a lot more money for services, and that allows more independence. But it is not unheard of for someone to be on the supports program and live in an apartment. And I'll tell you about that. So when you hear about affordable housing, what do you hear about? Well, it's not a voucher. Affordable housing is not a voucher. Affordable housing just means that development was developed with some kind of government support that was given to the developer so that they will maintain a certain amount of units that are somewhat affordable to people. And they have something called payment standards so that they will look at what the rents are for affordability. And they have a calculation that they use for affordability in different tiers. One of them is low income. Another one is middle income and such. 30% of area median income, 50% of area median income, and 80% of area median income. And there's a certain amount of those units, if it's an affordable development, that have to be adhere to that. And that's just simply what affordable housing is. Affordable housing is not necessarily supportive housing. People need affordable housing who work every day and who just don't make enough to live. So a lot of times you'll hear that called workforce housing or whatever. You'll hear it's in the governor's budget that they're going to put some money into developing workforce housing. So that's what it is. But basically, they've gotten some kind of support through either the federal government or the town or somehow in some way such that they were able to build this housing. It's usually 30, they have to maintain it for 30 years in that affordability range. And that's just simply what it means. So some people with disabilities can just simply move into an affordable housing. They don't need a voucher if they're working in some way and earning a certain amount. But a lot of people that we serve do need both. They need a rental voucher and an affordable house, sometimes an affordable development. So what is a voucher? Rental voucher or rental subsidy. Some, a lot of times we'll talk about that. So a rental subsidy is a subsidy by which you as a person renting will only pay a portion of your income for rent. And the rest of it will be paid for by some government entity. You can have a rental voucher or rental subsidy and go and rent a unit from some landlord. It doesn't have to be an affordable unit. You can, if you can find a unit, that is the key word there. If you can find a unit within the range of their payment standards, you can rent if you have a rental assistance voucher. So they're very, very critical to being able to live independently. I think I just kind of said that. So if you have a $1,000 a month apartment and you have you earn $900 in your income, which is not really that far off from SSI, you'll pay $300 towards that apartment, and the $700 will be paid by some government entity. What are they? There's several different kinds. Section 8, SRAP, and supportive housing connection vouchers. So housing choice vouchers or Section 8 Section 8 vouchers are paid for by the federal government. They are maintained by public housing authorities in many communities or the Department of Community Affairs. They're excellent vouchers. They are not state specific. So if you have one of those, the benefit of one of those vouchers is that you can go to another state with it after a year. So that is kind of the gold standard of rental vouchers. They are not available easily. A lot of times you'll get on a wait list to get that. I think there was a wait list opening for vouchers about a month or two ago. So it's not easy. There are limited, but they're in the federal budget. So we're always trying to maintain more of those. So we're always advocating in the HUD budget federally for those. And then the state has about 4,000 rental assistance vouchers. And those are maintained also through DCA and the public housing authorities. And those rental assistance, there's only 4,000 of them. They work similarly to Section 8, except you can't take them obviously out of state because the state is the one paying for them. That is the Department of Community Affairs budget is what supports them. We'd love to have more of them, but we don't, they're just limited. I want to mention also about the Section 8 vouchers and sometimes the rental assistance vouchers. Sometimes they're project specific. So there could be two kinds. So you can have a rental voucher where you can just take it and go rent an apartment, and that's great. Or sometimes the state will identify projects that have a voucher, and that project, whoever moves into that unit, will be able to take advantage of that voucher and rent, but you cannot take that. You don't own that. If you move out of that unit, it doesn't go with you. It stays with the project. A lot of times we try to marry some vouchers with funding because that that really is a good combination. So for example, the National Housing Trust Fund has funds that we are attached to vouchers. The state makes sure that those projects get a voucher. So that's great. And then we have DDD vouchers. And I'm not going to, there's probably people on the call who may know more about that, and that changes. But basically, you would go through your support coordinator. There's a form. There's that sometimes changes, but you would go through your coordinator to talk about whether or not you what you want and whether or not your budget will be able to support a voucher, and then you could be possibly awarded one of those DDD vouchers. They maintain through the Supportive Housing Connection. And all of these vouchers work similarly in terms of you're paying a small part, some government entities paying the rest. In this case, the Department of Human Services budget is paying for your voucher, right? You still have to adhere to payment standards. You can only rent a place that has a certain amount of rent that is allowed. So the Supportive Housing Connection vouchers are what they call temporary. And I'm saying that because what they really ideally want is for you to get off of their voucher that the Department of Human Services is paying for and get on another voucher that is a little bit more permanent, preferably the Section 8, obviously. But it's temporary in that, no, I don't know of anybody who's been thrown off of that, but what they want when you get that voucher is for you to immediately try to apply for another kind of voucher. So that eventually when you get the other kind of voucher, they can give this one to someone else. So, I mean, I think that's kind of how it works. Some challenges we've had with Supportive Housing Connection vouchers, they're not just DDD vouchers. Department of Mental Health and Human Services has those too, and that is Supportive Housing Connection. They're managed by those as well. Some of the challenges we've had in the past is different payment standards. So we would ideally like all of the payment standards to be the same. So HUD says in Essex County, here's how much we can pay for a rental unit that's 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. We love all of the vouchers to be the same. And I think right now they may be nearing the same, but we've had trouble with that. Whereas the HUD vouchers pay a certain amount, and then, the other vouchers have not quite caught up with that. And that really presents situations where we're pitting one voucher against another, and that's not great, since we want to find landlords that, all landlords are supposed to accept vouchers. We have a law that says they can't discriminate on types of service, types of payment, but we definitely want the landlords to be amenable to vouchers and be comfortable with people with disabilities living with them and doing all of that to support each other. So we definitely want the payment standards to be the same. That's like a given. So that's the other one. This is the easiest voucher to get, I'd say. You should be, talking to your service provider for that. And then, of course, in your budget, you're going to need all kinds of other things to help you live your life and thrive. And that means that you'll be eligible for all kinds of assistance, hopefully SNAP and LIHEAP and all kinds of other services that will help augment your budget and allow your disposable income to be used for other things. So I'm going to stop there and play this, which I hope will pull a lot of what I just said together a little bit.
I'm Deborah. I've been the special needs housing consultant working on this project. In my role, I match up a housing developer who could be a for-profit entity with a nonprofit or service provider such as the Arc of Essex. In this project, we were able to establish an integration of people with disabilities into a larger complex.
This is a brand new 5-story, 110-unit apartment building in Irvington. This units that we have here on the first floor, there are 6 of them that are set-aside units for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities that the Archdiocese County provides supports to in varying capacities. We were brought to the developer as the service provider option for the set-aside requirements of this particular project. It is a tax credit project with varying affordability requirements. We had some influence with the developer on the design of some of the units from the perspective of having experience with how we support people in individual units, the type of consumer that we would anticipate living in this environment. A lot of the recommendations focused on bathroom and kitchen designs. Open spaces, lots of cabinetry in the kitchen. Bathroom, we did not want tubs, walk-in showers. There are 3 apartments together in a row with 2 doors in between, connecting all 3 of the apartments on one section, and then another section has another 3 apartments, and there's a door in between those apartments as well. This allows for us to provide staff support as well as the consumers themselves being able to share time together if they so choose. Sometimes it is isolating for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live alone, but through choice with the connecting doorway, they're able to then almost share time with their neighbor.
We have some individuals here that are on the supports program and some that are on the community care program. In both cases, we're able to pair a housing voucher from the Supportive Housing Connection with the supports program or the community care program to meet the individual's needs so that they can live in a single apartment here. We have some individuals on the supports program that live here that take public transportation, have a job in the community, are able to access community resources on their own, and maybe the staff just need to help with some budgeting issues or making sure that they have access to transportation or need some assistance with food shopping and meal planning. And then we have other individuals that are on the community care program that need more assistance with their daily living skills, and the staff really are able to come in and help with hygiene needs in the morning, making breakfast, getting dinner prepared, food shopping, and then we also have an overnight for any type of emergency situations that may arise, or if the individual just needs support overnight.
Here in Irvington, there's the access to a lot of community services. So people can walk down the street to get groceries, to the bank, to the stores. On the street corner right adjacent to this facility is the bus stop. And they can take buses all over for those who are able.
Do you take the bus to work or the?
Yeah, take the 39. I could walk down here to get the 39. And also I could get the 9-4. The Smith Island. I go places, lots of places, to the movie and live some more. That's where I got the haircut. I work in Captain Cherry, doing screw, soap dish. And then we got a warehouse, workshop, maintenance, and then we got a mail room. Then we got a food service.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
My favorite meal is cooking, like chicken, hamburger, hot dog. And lasagna, basic, and other kinds of stuff.
Can you invite me to dinner sometime?
Sure. Yeah.
So that I like that video because after we talked about the different kinds of service programs, the voucher, you kind of see how you can see that pulled together a bit. I just want to talk a little bit about the navigation course that we did. So we were able to, and I don't want to really talk about housing navigation because there's so much going on with housing navigation throughout the state. We do know that everybody needs help finding a place, doing applications, all of those things. And there's so much going on with the Department of Community Affairs and Medicaid in supporting those things. But we were able to do a class for certainly people who are professionals working with intellectual and developmental disability clients, and we were able to pull together some training, and we looked at all of these things that go into what makes someone be able to live in the community, from looking at what they want to some of their planning tools and Social Security and the housing vouchers and all of that. We were able to do that in 30 hours of training, and I pointing that out, and we did this once, and I know that we're working right now with the Bog Center to take a few of these pieces and just can them into an online training. It won't be the same because we had a cohort that really shared a lot of experience with each other, and we hope to maybe augment what the Bog Center is doing later with sort of a cohort collaborative. But we were able to do this, and all of these people are on our website is the point of this, and they can really help you. We have people in the north, the central, and the southern part of the state, and I will point out that there are additional people in a listing that is up at the top. You can click on it and it opens another PDF with more people. We did it this way because these people completed the homework, quite frankly, and we felt like they deserved to be having the full completion of the course. But the people on the other list did all of the training as well. So there's quite a lot of people who were trained and have special expertise in helping people put together their housing. A lot of them are support brokers and coordinators. What are the things we're working on to end this really? We're working on making sure there's a lot of capital for housing construction. That's one. We're always working on those housing vouchers to get more of them, but more importantly, to have an adequate subsidy. So I'll give you an example. Even people in group homes will use a subsidy to pay, or at least that will be given to the providers. And that is something we are advocating for in this budget, because the subsidy, the portion of that group home amount was from 2017. So when I say the adequate rental subsidy or subsidy, you know, has to always be looked at, those payment standards and various ways that they're calculating that constantly has to be looked at to make sure that they are maintaining the same as the community, you know, at large is the market is, it will bear, because you know how much rents have gone up. So it's one thing to have a subsidy, and it's another thing to find the housing with any kind of assurance that that subsidy is even near the rents that landlords can you know, acquire from people. And then of course the services, the funding for services, and more importantly, the support staff. So workforce is a big challenge, and that's something SHA is advocating for, supports for the workforce, because they're challenged all across the board, and that's a crisis really. You need people to help people live independently. So that workforce, all of these things really have to work together. All right, questions. I think we're good, right? I think we've got some time for questions maybe.
Diane, thank you so much. So we actually have a tremendous response to this webinar. Our attendance is phenomenal, and it just shows the need for information around this area. So thank you again for sharing the resources. We do have the Supportive Housing Connection. I put a link in the chat section for everyone to see, because we had some questions that were really specific to that program.
So that is the Supportive Housing Connection actually are the people who maintain the vouchers. They maintain them, they don't give them out. Okay, they're responsible for making sure that the places are, you know, they go out and inspect them, they do all that, they make sure that the landlord leases are right. It's not some, if you have a question about your Supportive Housing Connection voucher, you really should go to your support coordinator or DDD. That, so just to it's good to go read about it, but those are people that really deal with the landlords and the leases and things like that. I'm not sure that, you know, they're going to answer the right question. I just want maybe your question to be answered correctly.
Absolutely. And so please, everyone, use that as a resource to see if that will provide any of the information that you're seeking. I also dropped in a link. We did have Miss Courtney Davey present.
Good.
And that link to that webinar is actually in the chat section. I will copy and paste that again so that you don't have to keep scrolling and searching. But I think that that may offer some additional details around, again, that specific program. So, so we'll post that, but the information that Diane had to share here was varied and great in other areas. So let's make sure that we get to some of these questions. I will say we're not going to be able to get to all the questions today, but we did have a lot of questions even submitted previously. If your question does not get answered today, Diane has her email on that screen. If it's appropriate to send the question to her, please feel free to do so. And then I will also type in the Community Living Education Project's contacts in case you have any specific questions that CLEP can help you with. So Diane, let's get to some of the questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. And you may have already addressed some of these. I'm going to ask anyway, just so you can offer maybe some additional details or clarity. So is it possible for two people receiving subsidies to share housing?
Yes. Absolutely. It is. Absolutely.
And how would someone go about learning more about that? Would you suggest that they go to their support coordinator? for
Yeah,
additional guidance?
yes. In fact, yeah, absolutely. So they would be sharing a 2-bedroom, and therefore whatever their voucher would then be kind of split, somehow, they each have a voucher, and that would be split between, the rent would be able to be, the voucher rent would be able to address the overall 2-bedroom unit. Yes.
Perfect.
So
can you please explain the process if a person has a supportive housing subsidy and decides to move from the location and it has been approved for during their lease period to another location or temporarily moves homes?
Okay, so say that again. So the person is living in a home and they have a voucher,
Yes.
right?
They decide
then
to move from that location
To another one.
to another during their lease period.
Okay, so then they have a lease. Are they breaking the lease? But these are the questions I would say. Are you breaking the lease? Are you wanting to move? The voucher technically you could use somewhere else, but I'm not sure what the components of the lease is. That is something that that would be a question maybe for the supportive housing connection. If I want to move, have you identify another unit? Have you told someone where you're going to move? So there's a couple of steps there, but you ought to be able to move with your supportive housing connection voucher. That should happen.
And again, we're going to suggest that you reach out the contacts in that chat section for you to really get those specific details. Quite often for Diane, for the Community Living Education Project, CLEP, for us to provide the answer that you are seeking, we're going to have to ask, 10, 20 other questions.
Yeah, I know.
The details needed. So again, if you're not getting your answers, reach out individually and we'll try to assist or point you in the right direction for the resource that will be able to assist you.
I'm assuming they have a support coordinator, so you could start with that. Absolutely. And if you have a voucher, you've already dealt probably with supportive housing connection on your lease and various other things. So you probably have a connection there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so Diane, can you talk a little bit more about people want to know how to find the units that are set aside and how can they search for them?
That's a good question. I was going to I'm looking at, I can probably put something in the chat in a minute. So it's not easy is the answer, but I will say that in our Housing Hub under other resources, there is a PDF that's called Find Housing, I think. So you can open that and we have a lot of links in there of places that you can try. Certainly this Housing Resource Center is on the DCA website. That's supposed to be a one-stop place for all available units, and you ought to be able to search on a number of components on that. It's not always up to date, so we've had complaints about that. But I will tell you, in terms of affordable housing in every town has something called an administrative agent, and they're supposed to be publicizing available units. That's their role They are paid to do that, right? So, and we have a number of links for those larger administrative agents in that PDF. One is CPG&H, another is Piazza, but you should be able to go to your town. If you want a specific town or a specific area, you should be able to go to them and they should be able to tell you the affordable housing in that town. But we get on the website, like I'm on the mailing list of CPG&H and Piazza and some of the larger ones, and I get notices electronically whenever there's a unit. And our newsletter, which anybody could sign up for, it's on our website, how you can sign up for that. In our weekly newsletter, we highlight open housing that we know about, right? So it's, comes out every week. So we do have a housing surge, but we have found that to be ineffective. We just can't keep up with posting that stuff. So we're just decided that we're going to post it in our newsletter until the window closes for the applications, and then we'll take it off. But we're going to, keep that highlighted. So we get a number of notices from affordable housing and we post it in our newsletter. That's how we do it. But there are other links, and I would suggest you try them all, and they're in that PDF called Find Housing under the Housing Hub, other resources, and I'll try to find it right now.
Wonderful. So Diane, as you're looking for that, so just to let you know, Diane, we can see your desktop just in case there's anything confidential or personal.
You can see my desktop?
I can, yep, now I can. So if you
Oh.
want to stop.
Oh, okay, don't worry. Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
Okay, great.
I could stop this right now and then.
Okay, perfect.
Probably.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And I do
Thank
want
you
to
for pointing that out.
Sure, no, not a problem. I do want to ask, I know some of our CLEP team members are on the call today or on this webinar. So we have Ann Martinelli, Maria Schiavella, we have Natalie Trump and Mary Knorr are also on the call. I know Mary went through your Navigator program.
Yes.
So, and she's had wonderful things to share about that. But if the CLEP team is on the call, please feel free to drop your email into the chat section. Nat, if you're still on, if you want to provide some of the phone numbers or emails, that would be really beneficial. So as you're looking for that, Diane,
I got it.
You just dropped it in the chat section. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about, we have someone asking about families who are looking to create a multiple home community with parents being very involved.
Yes, that comes up a lot. In fact, we had in our Navigator class, we did 3 additional classes at the end that people wanted to know about, and family housing, and we've done a number of workshops on that. So that is something I would say think long and hard about, because you have to maintain your own housing and it's not that easy. But certainly we have had instances, and 5 families is one, 5, I think, families. I can also find that link. They created their own housing, 15, 20 years ago, and they bought a home. They have, I think, 3 or 4 families, who support that home, and they did that together, and it works for them. They have their services. They, but there's a lot to think about. It's like maintaining your own home. You're creating a whole thing that you have to maintain. You have to find the money to buy it. You have to maintain it. The roof leaks, something happens, same thing. You're doing that. So it can work, but you do have to think about that. The other thing is, what we found with people who have explained that they've done it is that, you have to decide what happens if somebody's not working out, like how does someone exit that situation, and what criteria are you going to put in place to make sure that you can have someone exit if they're really being disruptive, or how do you fill that vacancy, and what's the criteria for the new person to come in should that person move or pass away, right? So I think there's all these things you kind of have to work out ahead of time. And we had a wonderful webinar on that from the gentleman who created that home. So I'll try to find a little information on that too. But, you know, it can work. People are doing it. Families are creating housing. We just had a workshop at our member meeting from a woman who's creating a, you know, a great kind of new way of providing housing, but really an educational program around it. It's based off of the Arizona model that, you know, they're training people in a certain amount of work, and they're being housed there, and then when they're ready, they move on. And this is for an autistic community. So she's creating that housing, and she's finding private funding for that. So people will wind up paying for that, but there might be some set aside for people who are low, you know, just low income without any kind of private funding. But she's creating that. She's doing it on her own in Monmouth County. So that we've had other people really try to create something. It's hard. It's hard, but people have done it. People have done it. Okay.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we do at the Community Living Education Project is we try to inform and share possibilities in community living, right? Recognizing that this is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we have individuals who are able to take on different responsibilities and play, you know, really direct their own lives and play very large roles in creating something unique for them. And then we also have families that are not able to be as active, and individuals who are not able to be as active in running such, you know, I don't want to say development, but such a unique opportunity. So whether a family is looking for, right, a provider managed setting, that traditional group home model, maybe a provider managed apartment, or if they're looking to self-direct and take on a huge part of that responsibility, right, but have a really have full access to the decisions being made in that environment. We're here to provide some resources, information. A lot of many of our team members are family members with great lived experiences in different areas, whether self-direction or provider managed setting. And I think what Diane was able to do today was really complement some of that information with sharing the different resources that sometimes we just don't know about, right? Often family members, we don't know what we don't know, and as well as professionals, right? So I think you gave us a tremendous amount of resources for us to look into to see what's going to be the right fit for our family. And
I will mention the farmstead because I see a bunch of questions. So what's been happening, and it's better now because DDD is really thinking broadly about what they'll allow. So home and community-based services, the services, do not want to pay for things that look like institutions, okay? They don't want a better isolated community. So that they've been hesitant to open up some models in the state around that might look like that. But they are coming around to that, and there's been a lot more information on what they called heightened scrutiny and different areas models. So they are allowing that more, as long as the community has a lot of access to the outside community, you know, amenities and close by, and there's a lot of interaction. They're looking at allowing a lot more models. And so that's what I'll say. You can build it, but you need the services. And if you're not going to pay for services because it looks like an institution, you have a problem. So
perfect. Diane, we have a ton more questions. I'm not sure what your schedule looks like. Do you have time to get to a few more?
Sure.
Perfect. So is it possible for the Supportive Housing Association to communicate the exact calculation for the subsidy? The 30% seems to be a little off. Is that the income average for the year?
Okay, so the payment standards, if you're looking at what someone's going to pay, the payment standards are on the website of DDD. So I'm pretty sure they're on there. And so that is based on how much the rent will pay, right? How much rent you can get. So then what you're going to pay out of that, I thought was 30%, but it could be between 30 and 40%. I'm not really sure, depending on the subsidy. So Is that what you're asking? I think I would just ask DDD that exact amount that you could pay is based on your income, really, your income. So
And
a
again,
certain
right,
percentage of your income. So I don't know, someone else might know on this call in terms of the DDD subsidy. Is it 30%? Is it closer to 40%? I'm not really sure.
and again, we
I-
drop that resource in
Yeah.
the chat section, right? We provide the information that we know, but we will direct you to the experts in that.
Yeah, I
area
don't
that we
get
know.
into the various nuances of the subsidy because I think it's just a little too confusing for that, you know. But that's how it works, kind of.
Diane,
What-
any experience in the small homes or RV?
Oh, tiny
housing?
homes?
Yeah.
So, yeah, tiny homes are tough. I love to talk about ADUs or accessory dwelling units a little bit more than that, but tiny homes are tough. They work in certain areas. We haven't seen a huge amount in the state. You know, they're very small. So for people with disabilities, that may be a challenge. You know, you look at these, the designs we're used to need bigger, not smaller, tiny units. The reason they're attractive is because they're cheaper, right? But you want to make sure that they work for you, right? So that's what I'll say. So when it's not like we're against tiny homes, they just have to be workable for the population you're trying to build for. We do have a video on manufactured home, which is, I wish there were more of those communities. We have one of the videos on that. And that is sort of, it's not a trailer because it doesn't look like a trailer, but it's a small unit home, very inexpensive. And that seems to work for a lot of people. There just aren't a lot of those complexes around in New Jersey, not enough of them. But that really works. And you can get a subsidy that pays a portion of that. And you can be living independently, you know, and that seems to work for certain people. And we have a good video on that. The accessory dwelling units, I'd love to see more policy done on that. We have some towns that have allowed that, and that would be a unit built on a property that is a single zone for single families, basically. And that seems to work, and that is, you know, working for not only people with IDD and families, but seniors. So you might have someone with a senior who owns a home, but, you know, has this ADU on their property that gives them income, that allows them to maintain, you know, living in place. Or you may have someone with IDD want to live in that home, you know, really on the property of their families, but maintain their independence. So accessory dwelling units, I think, are something that we could explore in New Jersey much more. That would work, actually.
Wonderful. Can you talk a little bit, is supportive housing the same as affordable housing?
No, supportive housing is not the same as affordable housing. Affordable housing is a component of supportive housing. So it's one component. You need affordability, but supportive housing means services and housing together.
And so the last question we're going to end with today, and again, I apologize to everyone whose question has not been answered. We actually have over 50 questions being submitted
I
through
know.
email,
Well, you
chat,
can send me them
and-
if you can distill them. I'm happy to.
Yeah, and so Diane, can you just show the last slide on your PowerPoint again, so people
Sure.
have your contact available?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the last question I want to get to, we do have a lot of people inquiring if the family's home has, meaning mom and dad's home, has an apartment attached to the family home. We have people who want to know if they can do additions and use a voucher there. if-
No, they can't. I don't believe that has been waived yet. You can't pay rent to a family member is the problem. Okay. So when you hear the video that we played with Matt and Dan, you hear that one family owns. That family does not have a voucher. Okay. Only the family who rents has the voucher and is allowed the voucher, because I believe there is not, you know, they're not allowing those vouchers to be paid to a family member. So that's a challenge that I believe is still there. I think the only way you can get, I've heard that if you cannot find another, you really have tried and you've tried to find a rental, and you document all the finding of the rental and you can't find a rental and, you know, you do all that, there may be a way that they would have to allow that because you've tried in the area to find, you know, I've heard people push that envelope that way. But there's a lot of documentation you need to provide for that.
And just so everyone has it, I am actually including my email in the chat section right now also.
And I will send you maybe a link to the 5 Friends, the guy who created his own housing. But there's a lot more than that. But if you want, I can do that. I can find it.
That sounds
5
great.
Friends.
Perfect. And then again, if anyone has any specific questions relevant to the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey, please reach out to Diane directly. And I'm sure that she'll try to help you
I'll try.
identify
Yeah.
the appropriate resource. We don't have all the answers, but we'll try
Right.
to find them for you if we don't.
Okay.
And
Good.
again, you know, on behalf of the Community Living Education Project, along with the Supportive Housing Association, and of course, Diane, thank you so much again. We greatly appreciate everyone attending today's session. Diane, is it possible for you to try to get the PowerPoint
Oh yeah, I'll send
to
it to
be
you.
shared?
Not a problem.
Perfect. So within the next 48 hours, you're going to see an email come through either from myself or from the Community Living Education Project. Please open that email. It's going to have a copy of today's recording. I'll make sure to link a copy of Diane's PowerPoint to that email also, so that everyone has that as a resource. Quite often, right? We have to listen to this information multiple times for it to really absorb. It's
Well,
complex.
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So that's why I spend so much time pointing out where things exist on the website, because that you can read up on it later. It'll make sense to you.
Sounds great. And as we're getting ready to say goodbye today, please be prepared. You're going to see a very brief 30-second survey pop up on your screen as we're signing off. If you'll take that survey, it would be greatly appreciated. It's really the information that you provide to us that allows us to better guide future presentations to better meet your needs. So we thank you all again for joining us. Please be well.
Okay.
Diane,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thanks.
Be well.